Men of War 2 still doesn't have an official release date outside of just 2024. The developers have, however, been updating the community, and I wanted to take a look at 4 news articles from the last couple of weeks which address some issues their player base brought up during the open beta tests. First, we'll talk a little bit about unit balancing and features, then about new graphics and sounds, and finally about new game modes and changes to existing ones, and just an overview of game modes in general. Something I talked about in every Men of War 2 video I've made basically was how strong artillery felt in the game. The developers say that they have studied the feedback from the community and decided to significantly change artillery going forward. Artillery will be a lot less accurate against moving targets, while also becoming less accurate when engaging enemy stationary artillery pieces. I just wish we got a max range for artillery still, especially for vehicles like the Sturmtiger, but we'll have to see how these changes will affect the strength of artillery going forward. I wish we could test out this change and some of the other changes I'll be discussing in this video, but the devs have stated they do not plan to run any more further open betas before the release. Preferably, battles wouldn't be decided by artillery players obliterating enemy heavy tanks as soon as they spawn, which ties in with the next unit and how scouting is their most important role. A unit I didn't end up using much, but saw used now and then in my games were saboteurs. They can sneak into the enemy part of the front line without getting automatically spotted. These received a nerf to their stealthiness, but mostly when using explosives and grenades. A stealthy saboteur squad on hold fire with eyes on or just outside of the enemy reinforcement area can really make life difficult, especially when combined with a big enough artillery piece, which is where I think that max range really comes into play, or well, the lack thereof at the moment. Furthermore, AA units can now distinguish transport planes from fighters and bombers, and will actually prioritize these attack aircraft over the transport planes, something that might save the AA guns in the long run, though personally I do find it annoying when paratroopers are being dropped behind my lines anyway. So I'm not sure whether I fully support this change. Maybe the ability to have a button toggle on each AA piece would be nice. This way you could say have your AA set to target transports, whereas one of your teammates' AA could set to be targeting attack aircraft first and work together that way. A bunch of new unit abilities have been added as well. One that kind of is actually a buff to artillery, which will allow self-propelled guns or SPGs like the American M12 King Kong or the German Hummel to actually dig in. This will make it a little bit harder to hit, though honestly a parked artillery is a dead artillery. You always want to fire a shot or two at most and then move, even if you move 10 to 30 meters each time, just to keep your enemy guessing where your artillery is located. Talking about graphics, Mode 2 will have PBR or physically based rendering going forward, which should make the game feel more realistic in terms of how lighting reflects off various surfaces. There are a few example pictures in the news article, and especially the water and mud reflections look really good in these shots with the windmill. The developers say that this will allow modders a lot more options in terms of tweaking lighting effects, and in general the game should look a lot better. There's this short clip of the new lighting in action on a Sherman tank, though I feel like it would have been great to see a before and after, even maybe side by side, to get a real idea of the improvement. Some massive news that I personally didn't even realize until I just read it myself: Mode 2 used to run on 32-bit, just like Men of War Assault Squad 1 and 2, but unlike Gates of Hell, which runs on 64-bit. This was a major obstacle in making Men of War Assault Squad more stable, though it appears now that the Men of War 2 developers have managed to get the game to work on 64-bit going forward as well. This should increase frames, reduce crash issues, and overall make the game run better. I think this is a great step forward, and honestly the best news regarding Mode 2 I've heard in a while. Now, I have a little bit of experience playing RTS games on console, but I was never a huge fan. But for those of you who are, Mode 2 will have a Steam Deck compatibility. This might be a fun gimmick for some PvE content, but I personally wouldn't dare join any PvP game while using my Steam Deck. Another thing myself and the community spoke about a lot was the use of some archaic voice lines from previous entries in the Men of War series. The devs say that they have recorded new shouts for all units in the game. Whether this means we will finally be rid of some of these 10-plus-year-old voice lines, or if they only added new ones to still be used alongside the old ones, isn't really known, but it was something that was instantly noticeable by myself and many other players, so it's a good thing they're at least attempting to change those old voice lines, or at the very least introduce a bunch of of new ones. Now, Men of War 2 will launch with a bunch of different modes, and they're divided in different rule sets, so I'll try to touch on most of these. First of all is the Battalions rule set, which is available in Frontline, Assault Zones, Combat Sectors, Area Control, Combat, Clashing Armies, and Incursion. With the Battalion rule set, you pick an artillery, infantry, or tank regiment, and you have a very limited amount of forces. It's the rock, paper, scissors idea, where you have to work together with teammates to win. Before battles, you can adjust and build your deck, so to say, like Wargame or Seal Division. Now, the frontline mode is a tug of war, trying to push the front line towards your enemy spawn to gain points to win. Assault Zones is similar to what we had in Men of War and Assault Squad, with capture points on the map. Controlling them earns your team points. Combat Sectors is similar to Assault Zones, but instead of capture points on the map is divided into sectors your team has to capture and hold for points instead. Combat, which is going to be very familiar to veterans of Men of War. All units are assigned points. The more expensive the unit, the more points it's worth. Whoever scores the most points by killing enemies wins that game. Clashing Armies is an interesting new one. The goal is to capture enemy territory with a front line. Again, think of the Seal Division mechanic. However, AI infantry from both teams will constantly charge into the opposing team's territory. Whenever an AI gets knocked out, a new one will spawn, causing constant battles around the front line. Incursion is also definitely worth mentioning in a little bit more detail. One team is defending and one team is attacking. This is similar to the Frontlines game mode for Men of War Assault Squad and Assault Squad 2. When the attacker captures a defender zone, they gain points and the defender is forced to fall back. Besides the Battalion rule set, there is also the Combined Arms one. Each player has access to way more units, and they aren't just limited to just artillery, tanks, or infantry. You can still edit and build your deck as you do in Battalions. You just have a lot more options and slots to pick from and use. You can play the Combined Arms rule set in Frontline, Assault Zones, and Combat. Then finally, there is the Classic one as well, something that was very often requested by players, including myself, to get that feeling of the old Men of War Assault Squad style of gameplay, where you don't build a deck, but you get access to all units of a certain faction. This, like Combined Arms, is again playable in Frontline, Assault Zones, and Combat as well. A cool addition is the Tanks Only game mode, which seems to be Assault Zones with capture points on the map, however only with vehicles, though not too much is known about that one at this time. Furthermore, 2 game settings have been added, Competitive and Realistic. These can always be activated regardless of what mode or rule set you select. In Competitive, vehicle health levels, or health bars I suppose, are visible, as well as some other changes, which seems really catered to faster and more easy to understand matches. Then Realistic removes a lot of markers and elements from the combat interface, as well as improving the so-called combat characteristics of all units, presumably meaning they do more damage and have less health. Vehicle damage will actually depend on where your shells impact, as well as the size of the incoming round. It sounds like a great addition and something I look forward to testing out for sure. Noteworthy final addition: everything I just talked about, each mode and rule set, can be played against and or with AI opponents, which you can customize in your custom lobbies. I think these couple of updates were actually very exciting. I secretly hope we get another beta test, but as I said in the beginning, the developers don't really have one planned. Now, what do you think of all these changes? Is it going to make you reconsider getting Men of War 2? Do you want another open beta? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.